I never meant to invite a single wolf, let alone an entire ballet of them, yet that is exactly what happened the first night I threaded Edouard Lasca's violin concerto in G minor onto the creaking mandrel of an 1897 Edison home phonograph and let the needle drop. I had gone to the abandoned relay station above the village of Sankt Brunn for practical reasons. Inside the corrugated tin shed stood a rickety 200-watt transmitter, its vacuum tubes clouded with dust but still functional. The museum that employed me had neither the budget nor the patience to wire a studio for AM broadcasting, so the Ridge station, long since decommissioned, seemed a convenient place to test our newly digitized archives. All afternoon I had been playing mundane roll sermons, municipal band marches, farmers' cooperative minutes through the horn. Static gulped most of them before the signal crossed a single hayfield. Then I noticed the unmarked cylinder sealed in black paper. The curator had shrugged when I asked about it. Came in the Barent bequest, supposedly a private recording, but no one's catalogued it. You can take it up the hill if you like. The moment I unwrapped the cylinder, I felt a change in the room, as though the station itself inhaled. The wax was dark green, unusually heavy, the grooves so tight they caught the lamplight like fish scales. Faded gold ink spelled out one word: Lasca. Lasca. The lost Carpathian prodigy, rumored to have written a single violin concerto before disappearing in 1901. According to legend, he had been found on a wooded hillside, bow in hand, throat torn by animals that left no footprints in the snow. His manuscript, never published, became an obsession of musicologists. If the cylinder was genuine, it deserved a soundproof lab, humidity control, and cotton gloves. I should have carried it back to the museum at once. Instead, twilight bled through the dusty windows. The sky a bruised purple, and an unreasonable urgency took hold of me. I wanted, no needed to hear it, to share it even. I wiped the mandrel with alcohol, warmed the reproducer diaphragm with my breath, and set the speed to 160 revolutions per minute, the archaic standard for Lasca's era. Then, impulsively, I flicked the switch that powered the transmitter. Whatever played through the horn would radiate across the valley on 1260 kilohertz, the frequency that once announced crop prices and funeral notices. No one owned an AM set anymore. No harm could come, or so I thought. The needle kissed the wax, and out poured a violin tone unlike any I had heard. Raw, resinous, intimate, as if the performer stood inside my ribcage and drew the horsehair straight across my heart. The melody began with a simple minor third, then twisted upward in microtonal increments that defied tempered pitch, coiled upon itself, and slid back down in size. The accompanying orchestra was faint, almost subliminal, buried so deep in the grooves it sounded like air breathing. Yet the violin soared above that phantom bed, a solitary voice summoning unnamed shapes. Halfway through the first movement, I felt a thud against the outer wall. A single, deliberate thud. I turned down the horn's volume and listened. Wind hissed under the eaves. Nothing else. The second thud shook plaster dust from the rafters. I crossed the room and unlatched the door. The Ridge station looked over a high alpine meadow that fell away toward the pines. Moonlight glistened on frost. Down in that whiteness, perhaps 30 yards out, stood a wolf, a gray as tall as a deer, ears pricked, staring at the shack. Wolves were rare this close to the village. When they did wander south, they traveled in packs. But this animal was alone. I retreated and closed the door, registering the foolishness of leaving the concerto running. I reached for the shut-off lever, but something in the violin's next phrase immobilized me, a harmonic pinch that cut like lemon on a paper cut, painful but cleansing. My hand trembled an inch above the lever, never making contact. The third movement began without pause, a presto of sawing triplets. The horn's bell rattled on its bracket. A chorus of howls rose from outside, more than one, many more, braiding into a dreadful, yearning chord that matched the concerto's tonic so perfectly I felt a fever bloom behind my eyes. When the final cadence snapped off, silence rushed into the room like icy water. I staggered to the window. The meadow seethed with wolves, dozens, perhaps 100, pelts boiling in moonlight. Yet they were not merely pacing or circling, they were standing upright, hind legs locked, forepaws lifted like dancers awaiting a cue. One by one they assumed positions in loose concentric rings, the outermost ring facing clockwise, the next counterclockwise, alternating inward until a single wolf stood at the center, head thrown back. The tableau was so precise it looked choreographed by a cosmic geometer. The phonograph needle hissed in its silent groove. A wave of vertigo smothered me. What had I broadcast? Then, though I swear I had not wound the spring again, the cylinder rotated backward, catching the stylus. The concerto resumed, slower now, pitched a perfect fifth lower, as if the composer had prepared a nocturnal double. At the first downbow, all the wolves began to move. Their forepaws rose and fell in patterns resembling courtly dance steps, minuets, gavottes, whirls that alternated predator grace with something heartbreakingly human. Frost flew beneath their claws, but they never broke the geometry of their rings. The central wolf spun alone, bowing to each compass point like a maestro greeting his orchestra. They danced until sunrise. I watched the entire night, hypnotized. Whenever the cylinder reached its end, the spring wound itself with a rusty clatter and started over, choosing a new tempo but never faltering. I might have stood forever if pink dawn had not glazed the horizon. At the first lick of daylight, the wolves collapsed onto all fours in a single synchronized slump, shook themselves free of the choreography, and loped back toward the tree line. Within minutes, the meadow lay empty except for paw prints gouged into the frost. Only then did the cylinder stop, and with a tired click, refused further motion. I left it on the mandrel, locked the station, and stumbled downhill to the museum bungalow where I lived. My mind felt blistered, as if the nocturne had scraped off layers of ordinary thought. That afternoon I phoned Jonas Kraus, my closest friend and the most skeptical musicologist I knew. "Alaska?" he said when I told him. "You're either hallucinating or holding the biggest discovery of the century, probably both." "Come tonight," I said. "Bring your field recorder and extra batteries." He arrived before dusk, cheeks red from the hike. We lugged a battery pack, a pair of ribbon microphones, and Jonas's battered Leica to the ridge station. I had not dared play the cylinder again. It lay in its cradle like an unprimed explosive. Jonas insisted we verify its authenticity first. Under a magnifier, he found the stylus chatter typical of experimental home recordings circa 1900, along with minute crescents where Laska's initials EL had been scratched into the wax before the take. Either genuine or a brilliant forgery, he conceded. Then he spotted something stranger. The grooves were cut in two interleaved spirals, one starting at the rim, the other at the center, overlapped so finely they looked like one track. Depending on where the needle joined, you got a different performance. "A double helix," he whispered. "No wonder it plays backward." We selected the outer spiral, wound the motor, opened the transmitter gate, and waited. The violin sprang to life, as searing as before. Jonas closed his eyes, conducting invisible arcs. I kept watch through the window. Frost rimed the grass again. A pair of yellow eyes surfaced at the meadow's edge. Then another, and another. Jonas hadn't yet reached the cadenza when the wolves strode into view, upright, arranging themselves in rings. He froze, bow hand suspended. I dragged him to the window. "Believe me now?" He said nothing for a long while. Then, "Record them." We mounted microphones outside the door. The Leica's shutter clicked as the dance began. This time, under the mechanical pulse of the camera, I heard other sounds woven into the concerto, panting rhythms, claws crunching hoarfrost, and underneath, a bass line of low growls that modulated perfectly with each key change, as though the wolves themselves provided continuo. The dance lasted until the sun warmed the Shackleton Range peaks. A rosy pulse struck the meadow, and once again, The wolves folded back to 4 legs and scattered. Jonas and I remained in the doorway, boots numb, ears ringing. He lowered the camera, cheeks salt-streaked with tears. "Clara," he said, "we can't keep this secret. The world must see." "Or we destroy it," I said. "I don't think the wolves are the only beings that answer this music." He glared. "Mysticism doesn't suit you." "No," I replied, just caution. We packed up. Jonas slipped the cylinder into its black paper despite my outcry. "For safekeeping," he insisted. He took it to his apartment above the bakery, promising not to play it. I barely slept. Each time I closed my eyes, the violin's opening third sliced through me, summoning rings of dancers behind my eyelids. At dawn, I decided to fetch coffee from the village square. Passing the bakery, I noticed flickering light upstairs and the silhouette of Jonas's gramophone horn. I bounded up the stairs and burst in without knocking. The concerto whined from the horn at half speed, a mournful dirge. Jonas hunched over the windowsill, binoculars glued to his face, the radiator steaming beside him. He didn't turn when I shouted. Outside, the cobblestones were deserted. No wolves this far into town, but the rooftops bristled with crows, all facing his window. Their black shapes shifted in jerks, matching the bowstrokes. I slammed the gramophone lid. The needle skidded free. Jonas wheeled on me, eyes bloodshot. "They came," he said hoarsely. "No wolves this time. But something listened. Do you feel it? The air is like crystal." I yanked the cylinder off the mandrel. "You promised." He blinked, as if waking from anesthesia. "I'm sorry. I only meant to study the intonation. I forgot the needle was down when I rewound." A crash interrupted us. The front bakery window splintered inward, scattering loaves. The silver wolf burst through, fur slashed with daylight, forepaws extended like a fencer's lunge. It landed on the tiles, skidded, scrambled upright, and marched up the stairs. Behind it came another, then another, claws clipping like tap shoes on the risers. I snatched the Leica, Jonas the ribbon mics, and we fled out the back, hearing display cases shatter behind us. The wolves did not pursue. They seemed content to occupy the apartment as if it were a theater they had rented for rehearsal. By noon, word had spread of rabid dogs loose in town. Hunters, armed with rifles, gathered near the fountain. Jonas and I argued behind the library. "Give me this cylinder," I demanded. His jaw nodded. "You'll smash it." "And save lives." He handed it over at last, though not without bitterness. I wrapped it in my scarf, tucking it inside my coat. We agreed on a fragile truce. No more broadcasts, no more experiments, until we understood the stakes. That night I placed the cylinder in a metal biscuit tin, buried the tin beneath the sandbox behind the museum, and tried to believe the matter finished. I underestimated human greed. 3 days later, a black Mercedes pulled up to the museum. Its passenger was Dr. Karl Reifen, a Vienna collector notorious in auction circles for acquiring morbid curios. He introduced himself with a card embossed in crimson ink, "Chiromantic Acquisition." He had learned, through colleagues, of an unpublished Lasker recording, and wished to buy it for the preservation of European cultural patrimony. I lied that no such item existed. He smiled indulgently, eyes the watery blue of diluted antifreeze, and left without pressing. That evening, I dug up the biscuit tin to move it, only to discover the sand churned, the tin gone. Patches of gray fur clung to the shovel marks. At once I suspected Reifen, but the more chilling possibility was that the wolves themselves had dug it up. Jonas and I met at the ridge station to strategize. Snow powdered the meadow. We found paw prints circling the shack, terminating at the locked door. Inside, dust coated the phonograph, yet someone or something had traced an unbroken spiral across the table with a claw tip. Jonas paced. "Riffum will attempt a public broadcast. Imagine the chaos if every wolf between here and Croatia comes waltzing down the Autobahn." "We retrieved the cylinder," I said, "and then—" "Destroy it?" he finished. "Clara, it's art. Even dangerous art deserves—" A low growl from the threshold cut him off. The central wolf, the maestro, stood, outlined against drifting snow, eyes amber as violin varnish. It stepped across the sill, forepaw raised as though eager to conduct. Around its neck hung the biscuit tin by a strap of braided reeds. I extended my hand. The wolf advanced, stiff-legged but without malice, and laid the tin at my boot. Up close, its fur smelled of pine tar and winter sunlight. I knelt. The wolf watched, chest heaving, while I opened the tin and lifted out the cylinder. A fresh crack ran along one edge, but the grooves seemed intact. "Thank you," I whispered. The wolf blinked once and backed away, then turned and trotted into the darkness. Jonas exhaled. "It wants us to play it again, or it wants us to keep it from reefing." We agreed on both readings. That night, while village police chased rumors of upright wolves seen crossing rooftops, we loaded the phonograph, a gasoline lamp, and a bundle of dynamite left over from an old quarry project into Jonas's truck and drove to the limestone caves above the river gorge. The plan was absurdly theatrical. Lure Rifen, lure the wolves, play the concerto one final time to lead them inside, then seal the entrance. I planted the cylinder on a boulder within the first cavern chamber, horn angled toward the mouth, so the sound would funnel outward. Jonas ran leads to a battery and signal booster he had salvaged from the transmitter. The violin would carry for miles. Midnight. Snow sifted in through the arch. Far off, an engine coughed Mercedes straight six. Rifen approached. I wound the motor and positioned the needle at the inner spiral, a version we had not yet heard. The opening was barely audible, a whisper of sul ponticella that grazed silence like a matchhead scraping stone. Yet the effect was immediate. Ridgetop pines shuddered, and figures emerged from the dark wolves, scores of them, originals and newcomers alike. They formed their rings in the gorge, claws clicking limestone like castanets. Rifen strode into the clearing, revolver drawn, an assistant clutching a recording rig behind him. He shouted for us to hand over the cylinder. Instead, I let the concerto swell into its first tutti. The wolves rose, towering even taller in the confined canyon, and began their dance. A stately pavane this time, each pawfall echoing off cavern walls in thunderous syncopation. Rifen fired a warning shot. The central wolf advanced, unflinching. Perhaps Rifen intended another bullet. Perhaps awe stayed his hand. Either way, the wolves closed around him, not attacking, but shepherding, guiding him into the ring as if he were a clumsy recruit. The assistant bolted into the trees. I signaled Jonas. He touched 2 lead wires to the dynamite caps. A tremor rolled through the ground. The cave's outer arch collapsed in a cloud of chalky grit. Moonlight blinked out, replaced by total black. Inside, the concerto surged on, echoing deeper into the mountain. I lit the gasoline lamp. Stalactites trembled overhead like frozen quills. The wolves pivoted, directing their rings farther into the subterrane, toward chambers no human map had named. Rifen stumbled with them, eyes wide, revolver useless. At the scherzo, a path opened, wolves to either side, Jonas and I in the middle, following the maestro. We walked for minutes or hours. Time hung skewed until we reached a vast hall. Where an underground river hissed, there the music reached its final adagio. I felt each note peel away layers of fear, leaving only an ache that was both sorrow and acceptance. When the last harmonic faded, the wolves sank to all fours. The maestro turned to us, ears swiveling. I understood. They wished to stay, or perhaps had always belonged here. The concerto had been the tether between their world and ours. Breaking the cylinder would free them from the human melody. I set the wax on a stone and raised the butt of Rifen's fallen revolver. Jonas did not stop me. The first blow cracked the helix. The second shattered it into green shards that skittered into the river's ink. A silence deeper than music settled. One by one the wolves dipped their muzzles, as if bowing, then slipped into side tunnels and were gone. The maestro lingered last. He regarded me, amber eyes reflecting the lamp, then trotted after his kin. We found another exit hours later, a fissure that opened near the riverbank downstream. Dawn glazed the horizon. Jonas touched my sleeve. Listen. No violin, no howls. Only the hush of water under ice, and far away, crows greeting morning. The world sounded ordinary again. Back in the village, Riefin's assistant spun a tale of rock slides and mad dogs. Authorities searched, but found only paw prints halting at a wall of fresh scree. Riefin himself was never seen again. Weeks passed. Snow melted. On the ridge meadow, new grass erased the dance rings. Jonas prepared a paper on Laska's double helix technique, carefully omitting supernatural details. I drafted a report that concluded the green cylinder had degraded beyond salvage, the most truthful lie I have ever told. Life regained its quotidian texture, yet some nights, just before sunrise, I dream of the maestro wolf, spinning alone on a crystal floor, paws tracing perfect geometry. In those dreams, I am the violin, strings tuned to a key that tastes of winter and long journeys home, and the dance continues, somewhere beyond the reach of any needle, broadcast forever on silence.